Well, that didn't go to plan, did it? Tottenham Hotspur lose 4-0 to Bayern Munich in our final friendly game of pre-season. And not great preparation for the Super Cup next week, I've got to be completely honest. And look, as always with these pre-season videos, I always say don't take everything for gospel. Form, fitness, etc, etc is going to be picked up by the start of the season. However, there were problems today. There were issues today. And I think, I've seen some people really, really crashing out on Twitter. What a surprise, right? People crashing out on Twitter. Who would have thought it? And I hear some of the concerns, and I definitely think there were some concerns today that I do want to touch upon, to do with the defensive actions of our midfielders, sort of the low block and the issues that I saw with that today, and sort of defending deep and transitional football as well when we're playing like that. This team in particular didn't perform great, but we'll get on to all of that in a minute. But I think the key thing for me now is, how do Tottenham move in the last 2 weeks of the transfer window? What business do we do to go and solve this problem? Because there are key areas heading into the start of this season, and key areas in this team, as we all know, in that number 10 area. I still think that we probably need two players in that area, one who can play maybe more off the left, and one who plays in that number 10 role. You look at somebody like a Bilal Al-Khanous, for example. We spoke about it in the last video, about £22 million release clause. Just go and get it done, and then go and get another after him. Maybe it could be a bigger signing after him, whatever. But it's a little bit concerning to me that we're going on and on and on. 6 days till the Super Cup, however long until the season starts now, 8 days or whatever, and we still haven't done that. We still haven't got that over the line. It's been a week now since, it's been 4 days since the James Maddison injury. It's been a couple of weeks since the Gibbs White news was announced. So we do absolutely need to get moving. But in this video, we're going to talk about the Bayern Munich game. And the first thing that I kind of wanted to talk about was personnel, because obviously João Palhinha making his Tottenham Hotspur debut. Now, again, we're not going to jump to any conclusions. João Palhinha has played one full 90 in the last 4 months, I think, for Bayern Munich, for Portugal, whoever it is, or that might actually just be for Bayern Munich. But point is, he's played very little football, and a player like João Palhinha, who relies so much on that physical element, on that sharpness, tackles, interceptions, off the ball work, amazing. When he's not fully fit, that's going to show up a lot more in his game. He's not somebody who relies on amazing technical quality. He's not somebody who relies on that on the ball, and that sharpness as well. It was clearly missing from his game today, right? He was sort of getting ran around, obviously gave away the penalty, was picking up some bizarre positions in midfield, was giving the ball away far too cheaply in midfield as well. And look, I'm not saying that all these problems are going to be eradicated come a couple of weeks into the season, but I think as he builds up that fitness, you'll start to see that level improve naturally with him. So I wouldn't be too concerned about him. But the one thing I do want to reiterate is that Bentancur and Palhinha as a midfield pivot just doesn't work for me. There's not enough on the ball there. There's not enough progression, especially if we are playing in that slightly lower block. It just doesn't work. When we're trying to, punch those balls through to whoever's playing the number 10. Again, Sarr was playing in the 10 today. I don't love Sarr in the 10. I much preferred it today when he dropped deeper. Palhinha came off, Bergvall pushed forward, and Sarr dropped back into that pivot with Bentancur. I thought the midfield looked a lot more fluid in that iteration of it. Obviously, we were playing the kids by then as well, which does have to be taken into account. But I'm a little bit down. I'm a little bit deflated after watching that. It was a tough watch, man. It was a seriously tough watch. But I wanted to talk about the low block, because a lot of our game today looked like this. Obviously, Vicario right on his goal line. Mickey van der Ven Romero doing a lot of box defending. Jed Spence and Pedro Porro in here, quite tight, quite narrow. And Bentancur and Palhinha almost just on top of them. Pat Massar dropping in deep here as well. And this was essentially the sort of positions that our players were picking up for the majority of that game, for the majority of the 60-65 minutes that Bayern Munich had their first team out. And it was an incredibly low block, but we didn't really have the personnel or the setup to go and hit them, on the transition and go and force them back into their own half, make them be worried about something going the other way, which is such an important part of playing a lower block transitional football, right? It was basically Mohamed Kudus, get the ball to him, see what he can do, and that's about it. There were so many times when he would beat a man, look up, and just nobody was there. I thought Richarlison and Bren Johnson was so poor, offered nothing really on that transition. Obviously, Pat Massar, I actually thought Pat Massar carried the ball really well a few times, and that's what his strengths are, carrying the ball well, won a few fouls in some good areas when we needed to relieve the pressure a bit, so I was quite pleased with it from that point of view. But again, he's not somebody who's going to find you that killer pass on the break, or is really going to link up really well with a Kudus or a Richarlison. So the attack wasn't really functioning going that way, and I think that really highlighted the need for a 10. I mean, somebody like a Morgan Gibbs-White, whilst he wouldn't solve all of our problems, would have been so perfect in a game like that to sort of link that defence to the attack, get us out of our own area a little bit, give us a breather, and that just wasn't really there. And so that's where it becomes so key to get a 10, to get that left-sided player. I do also think, Wilson Odobert would have been a much better option than Brennan Johnson on the left-hand side, but it's pre-season. Johnson probably needed the minutes more than Odobert did. Odobert played last week, so Johnson obviously came in and got those minutes, and I don't think that will be how we set up when the season starts. Obviously Richarlison just nowhere near as good at hold up as somebody like a Dominic Solanke, so this isn't what it's going to look like when we head into the season, but you might face some similar issues that I think are solved by getting that number 10 through the door, Odobert on the left hand side, Dominic Solanke. But defensively still, the way that Bentancur and Palhinha were almost dropping in at times, Romero was stepping out a little bit more, and when Bayern were pinning us in, it almost became like we had 4 centre-backs on the pitch. And then what was happening was, I'm just going to use Kinski as a demonstration, is that Leon Goretzka was just kind of wandering in this area, on the edge of the penalty area, around the penalty spot. And the ball would get cut back. And because these players had dropped so deep, there was all this space that was left on the edge of the penalty area, or around the penalty area. Goretzka had a number of chances where it just fell to him in about 5 yards of space. On the penalty spot, there was that volley that he dragged just wide. There was the other chance that he blazed over the bar as well. The goal that Bayern Munich scored, both of the goals that Bayern Munich scored in the second half, were shots from outside the box where the players just had too much time. I mean, to be fair, both unbelievable finishes. You can't take that away from them. But both had too much time on the edge of the area. Vicario was getting so angry. He was saying, players need to almost get out of his face a little bit and go and close the ball down. And that was kind of bizarre. And that continued to be a strong theme throughout the 65 minutes. And look, again, I don't think this is going to be a reoccurring theme when the season starts. And I think you'll have maybe a more progressive sort of player than Bentancur and Palhinha in that pivot alongside one of those two. And again, fitness, form, all of that will hopefully improve come the start of the season. But it was just a bit worrying to me how we got pinned in so deep and just weren't able to relieve the pressure. I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see what team he goes with in the Super Cup and how we do against PSG, a much better side than Bayern Munich, and a team that, if you let them pin you in for too long, they have so many threats in so many different areas that they are going to break you down and they are going to really hurt you. And I think we've got to be very careful. Vitinha arriving on the edge of the box, Fabian Ruiz arriving on the edge of the box, Dembele dropping out. They don't play with a target man in the way that Bayern Munich do with Harry Kane. There's not as much focus on dropping so deep, having those 4 kind of centre halves, 2 midfielders and 2 centre halves dropping in there to sort of mark those spaces in the penalty area. They'll be a lot more elusive. They'll be a lot sort of more fluid in their movement, interchanging. They won't be as easy to pick up, and I think that's going to be an interesting test for our players. I might do a video next week previewing the Super Cup and talk about sort of what lineup I really want to see going into that and how I think we can solve the issues that we saw against Bayern Munich today. So if you want to see that, then obviously let me know in the comments section and subscribe whilst you're at it as well. That'd be greatly appreciated. But yeah, that was the kind of defensive problem that I saw today. I think, again, in build-up, we were quite penned in. I thought every time you tried to play the ball out from the back, you sort of had Van der Ven in that space. You had Palhinha and Bentancur sort of just sat in here. You had Sarr pushing up a little bit higher. Obviously, Richarlison up there for the long ball. Johnson was hugging the touchline quite a lot. So was Kudus a lot of the time in build-up. And it was sort of like Porro and Spence were quite wide as well. And a lot of the time, we were sort of getting the ball, Vicario out to Van der Ven or out to Romero, quite basic, and then just giving the ball to Porro and Spence. And their options really were Johnson or Kudus up the line, putting them under pressure. And Kudus was able to deal with that a couple of times. Johnson just isn't the kind of player who is going to be able to deal with that, getting the ball back to goal with 2 players on him in that situation. That's just not what his game is, and you can't blame him for that because that's just not what he is about as a player, his qualities as a player, and that's not it. And a lot of the time, we're just losing the ball so aimlessly, or Jed Spence was pondering on it for too long, which obviously led to their 3rd goal by Munich. Or was it their 3rd goal? I think it was their 3rd goal. And he lost the ball another couple of times that led to chances for them. And I think, we weren't doing enough. We weren't being inventive enough. And it kind of reminded me a little bit of Tottenham last season, trying to build out from the back, where so much of it relied on individual brilliance to get out rather than sort of a real structure in place and a real sort of pattern to our build-up and a real sort of, mixing it up as well, variety of options that would lead to us building out a little bit better, being a little bit less predictable. But Bayern were just able to predict it so easily, put pressure on our fullbacks, which meant pressurised balls down the line. Midfield options were being marked, and yeah, that was a little bit frustrating too. It was just, kind of, it felt like we were in a pressure cooker and we just had no options of how to relieve it. And I know it was a preseason game again, the intensity wasn't quite there, but you would think that, even if that intensity improved, if you're playing some of the best presses in the world, again, PSG are not going to give us a second on the ball next week. And right now, that worries me a little bit. Like, we can't have that midfield playing against PSG. We'll get killed. Like, they'll nick the ball off us so many times. Like Vitinha, João Neves. I mean, João Neves is an issue. Him on Bentancur or Palhinha. Like, they're not going to have a second to think on the ball, and that's going to cause them issues as well. I did think it got a little bit better. So in the second half, when we made some of our changes, you had Odegaard coming on that left-hand side. You had Lucas Bergvall coming on for João Palhinha. And Pat Matassar dropping in there, and Bergvall playing a little bit higher up, which definitely did make us better. I prefer Sarr's legs in this area of the pitch, and I think Bergvall, whilst he wasn't really too involved, I think he gave us a little bit more of an option in terms of somebody who could hold onto the ball a bit better, that little bit more technical quality, passing, etc., etc. Matisse Tell, I thought, looked a lot brighter than Richarlison when he came onto the pitch. I think Richarlison, he did all right at a couple of snapshots in the first half. That one that he caught on the volley was a decent strike, but I just think since the injuries, Richarlison's sharpness and that edge that he used to play with has really gone from his game, which was such a huge part of why he was such an issue. I don't know, I've still got Kinski in there. Let me just remove him quick. But that was such a big part of Richarlison's game and what made him so dangerous and so threatening to play against. And now, feels like after the injuries, loss of confidence, whatever it is, just kind of gone a little bit. And maybe because it's World Cup here, if he can stay fit, we might see that return in a slight way. It's just the fitness thing with Richarlison. If he can stay fit for a couple of months, then you never know, I guess. But I think the side looked better when we had this kind of thing out. And this is probably more the kind of lineup I expect to see us go with against PSG. Like I said, I'll do a separate video for that. But just something to give us a little bit more of a chance when building out. Like, despite the fact you might automatically think PSG, one of the best teams in the world, you want defensive-minded midfielders in there, you want, breakers up a play, you also need to be able to relieve the pressure. Like, if we have Bentancur and Palhinha sat in there again, we're going to have so many issues trying to play out and trying to get out of our own box, to be perfectly honest with you. But I mean, other things today, Romero was out on the hunt for something. I mean, he was incredibly lucky to stay on the pitch in the end. Him and Harry Kane. I don't think Harry Kane appreciated the nature of a couple of Romero's challenges. That was nice to see Romero, I think, going. It's pre-season friendly. I've got a bit of license. The ref's not going to send me off, so I'm just going to clatter into a few people, which is fair enough. Another thing that I did want to briefly touch upon was Mickey van der Ven, because I think Van der Ven is somebody who, in his first year at Tottenham Hotspur, or his first 2 years at Tottenham, under Ange, such a big part of it under Ange was, playing on the halfway line, Mickey van der Ven, almost just reacting to situations and running back towards goal and using that pace, which obviously we know he's so amazing at. And that led to issues, obviously, with injuries and stuff, but it was almost like such a tailor-made role for Van der Ven. And I think that if you could pick on one small weakness in Van der Ven's game that I have noticed, it's his box defending and his awareness in and around his own penalty area when players are coming into his space and his zone. Because I think that's, requires a little bit more intelligence as a defender. It requires, to know when to bite, to know when to drop off, to be a little bit less reactive, which I think Van der Ven can be quite reactive sometimes as a defender, and be a bit more proactive and sort of read situations a little bit better, step in when you need to. And I think Van der Ven, again, he can do that, and he has done that. And don't get me wrong, there are a few times where he sniffed out the danger in and around the penalty area against Bayern Munich, but I think that's something that Romero has over him a little bit in this system. I think there's something that could slightly elevate in Van der Ven's game, I think, just to make him that slightly better presence in terms of being a box defender. I think, like I said, it's so hard to be critical of Van der Ven because he's such a brilliant defender, and I have no doubts that he's going to become a top box defender as his career goes on. Absolutely, he's got the physicality, he's got the height. I just noticed my Spurs flag's fallen down behind me, which is nice. Probably pretty symbolic of the day that we've had, really, hasn't it? 4-0 and one of the corners has fallen off that, so that's brilliant. But yeah, I think it's going to be interesting next week against PSG. I don't see us winning, to be honest. I'm going to be positive about it. I'm going down to the pub to watch it with some of the boys, so hopefully we at least give us something to hold on to with that. And obviously into Burnley next Saturday, we need a 10. We need a 10 in the next 6-7 days. We have to. If we don't get a 10, this fan base is going to go into meltdown. I can tell you that for free. And to be honest with you, I don't even think it would be unjustified at all. Because if we don't have a 10 by the time the season starts, it's looking bleak for the first few months of the season at least, because despite the fact that Dane Kulusevski is coming back and he's going to be back, apparently he's going to miss the first month of the season. He's been out for a long time, and that's surgery. We know that Dane Kulusevski is a player that, you know, relies on his physicality quite a lot, and it's going to take him a couple of months probably after he comes back to get right back up to speed and to be the Dane Kulusevski that we know and love and be at sort of full fitness and peak form. So, you know, it's probably looking at a couple of months relying on Sarr and Bergvall rotating in that position if we don't sign a number 10, which is just not doable, especially against those sides that we need to be more front-footed, we need to be more dominant, we need to have that creator in there. Maybe it becomes a situation of Odegaard playing in the 10 and Matthias Tell playing out on the left, but that's not good enough, and that's not what Tottenham Hotspur need heading into this season. And so, full focus, full steam ahead. If we have to overpay a little bit for somebody, honestly, like, I've seen the links to Nico Paz today, and they've got a 50%. Real Madrid have got a 50% sell-on clause, so Como are going to ask for silly money for him. And whilst you don't want to massively overpay, he's a hugely talented player, and he come in and instantly raise the level at Spurs in that 10 role off that left-hand side. So, I don't know. Honestly, I've been looking at some of the transfer targets, and they're getting less and less by the day, it seems. So Tottenham need to move quickly. We need to get something done. Hopefully there's a plan that's been sort of in the works for the last couple of days, and we'll get some news on that soon. But yeah, let me know what you thought about the Super Cup. About Bayern Munich. Thank God that wasn't the Super Cup. About Bayern Munich, the pre-season game, obviously 4-0 loss, in the comment section down below. Let me know if you want to see that PSG video as well. Potentially like trying to predict the team, trying to sort of break down what I think we should go with or what I think we need to go with in that game. Maybe we've got a new signing coming into the contention. I doubt they'll be in contention to start the game, but maybe in and around the squad for that game as well. That could provide some excitement. But yeah, you know, not loads that we learnt in that game, just a bit of a depressing one. Some slight issues defensively that I think definitely need not ironing out, but I think kind of half of the issue will be ironed out by our first team playing, by players coming back from injury, hopefully, and by just sharpness and match fitness. So nothing too crazy to panic about, but it's time to panic in the transfer window because Tottenham Hotspur need to get moving. And yeah, nice one. If you are new to the channel, obviously, and you like the video, please consider liking and subscribing. That'd be greatly appreciated. And up the Spurs.